what did I do, and am I going to make it through this? I think that was the beginning of the downhill slope.
Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to hear their stories of healing and resiliency through their outdoor pursuits. Captain Cody Margate, appreciate you agreeing to come on today.
Oh yeah, pleasure's all mine.
And before we get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I always like to start out with saying that I'm a little girl dad and got 3 little girls, and my journey to get to guiding kind of started out, through going through the military, and I was in the Army for a while. I was 11 Bravo infantry, and then got to be in law enforcement for a little bit, and realized I wanted something a little bit more peaceful, and that's kind of how I ended up getting to the guiding world.
How old are your kids?
So my oldest is 16, followed by a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, all girls.
That's a lot of female power going on there.
It is. So
You're getting overrun.
I did. I had to get a male dog to kind of level things out.
Nice. Well, before we'll get into all that other stuff in a little bit here, but before we do that, I just want to learn a little bit about, where you're from, where you grew up.
Sure.
Why don't you start there? Where were you born?
You're looking at it right here.
You're a Charleston native, huh?
Charleston native, one of the very rare breeds
Yeah,
nowadays.
I was about to say, that's a rare breed these days.
It
Few
is.
and far between.
Everybody's always surprised when they ask me and they hear that I'm local. I'm born and raised, and they're always like, "Really? I've never met anybody like that." It's really strange.
Were your parents from here?
So my dad, my mom is. Her whole family was. They have roots here from all the way back in the Civil War.
Wow.
My dad, I think he was born in Pensacola, Florida, if I remember correctly. And my grandfather was in the Navy as well. So he moved around a lot and ended up here, kind of, digging roots here. And my grandfather's actually from the Philippines, so yeah.
Kind of mixed all over the place.
All over the place, yeah.
So did you go, what high school did you go to here? Where around Charleston did you grow up?
So I grew up in Goose Creek.
Okay. North Charleston-ish?
Well, it's a little past North Charleston, kind of heading towards Monk's Corner area. Yeah, it was an interesting place to grow up. We had the lake not too far away, and then you had the salt not too far away. So I kind of had that mix of both when it comes to fishing. I got to go do a lot of freshwater, a lot of saltwater. It was a cool way to grow up.
Did you start fishing at a young age? Did your dad fish? Your mom
did.
Fish?
I grew up fishing just very, very young age. I remember being a little tiny thing fishing with my dad. He used to have a ProCraft bass boat back in the day. And, I grew up on that. I still remember my first bass clear as day. My first one. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. It's so strange to remember those things and not remember anything else,
Did you fish the salt when you were a kid? Did you guys have a boat?
Yeah. I remember going in a bass boat in the saltwater all the time, fishing redfish and
nice.
Stuff like that.
In the marsh, in the shallower water?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in Bushy Park, in the Bushy Park area over near Goose Creek, near the naval base. My dad was in the Navy for a while too, so we lived right there, and we dropped the boat in at Bushy Park, and we go either freshwater side or saltwater side. I never knew which side we were going to, but I knew we were going fishing, so I always looked forward to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you ever start fly fishing at all when you were younger?
I didn't really pick up fly fishing until I got out of the Army, actually.
Okay.
I met a couple friends. I started working at a place called the Charleston Angler when they were still open, and kind of how I picked that up. I kind of got wrangled into that, and I like it a lot, man.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
It is.
We talked about that, a rabbit hole
sure,
you start going down. So tell me about high school. What was that like for you?
That was an interesting time. I went to Stratford, actually, and
is that a private school?
No, it's a public high school.
Okay.
Yeah. I was kind of a troublemaker, to be honest with you. I grew up doing a lot of bad kid things, and trying to be the coolest kid in school, and get wrapped up in a bunch of trouble. But that was the start of my stressful years.
What kind of trouble is trouble? Give me an example.
Man, I smoke a lot of weed and get caught with it, and sneaking out and getting in fights, and I was a troublemaker back in the day.
Yeah, well, sometimes my high school experiences weren't too far off from that.
Yeah.
So it's not for everybody. Some of us have other interests at that time that we pursue, and not necessarily the academic part of it.
Nope, it definitely wasn't for me.
So what? Did you go into the Army after high school?
So not directly out of high school. I actually right out of high school, actually, my girlfriend at the time, we got pregnant with our oldest daughter. And, you know, I was working random jobs, trying to figure out a way to pay for everything. And then one day I was like, I've got to do something different. So I decided to go in the Army. And
How old were you at that
I
time?
was 20, almost 21.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So in that time between high school and joining, you were just working odd jobs and trying to support,
That's right. And
your
it
new
just, I
family
wasn't successful at it. So I had to do something. So that's kind of what drove me to getting into the Army.
So how did you decide, once you made the decision to go into the military, how did you decide on the Army? What made you choose the Army?
Well, you know, I think we need to take a step back in time to kind of get to that point. I think that I grew up, you know, always doing crazy stuff. And, you know, I grew up skateboarding and, you know, always trying to find something, you know, fun and extreme to do. And, you know, I think a lot of the people that end up in, you know, a combat job as far as like infantry or ranger or whatever it may be, they come from a background of doing those extreme things like skateboarding, surfing, car stuff, whatever it may be, just to kind of get that excitement to keep going. And that's kind of why I chose the Army. I wanted that excitement, something kind of extreme, a lot of shooting and, you know, stuff like that. I think that's what kind of got me to that point. I think that's where my mindset was at the time.
Yeah, I think that, you know, rambunctious young men,
Yes.
or it could be young women too at that age. And, you know, like we were in high school, you know, we're trying to find things to keep us busy and to fill that, I guess, for lack of a better term, we want to be busy doing stuff where there's a void we want to fill or something. But, you know, so that makes sense that, you know, deciding that you want to do something combat arms type in the Army when you joined. Did you join specifically, like what MOS or job did you go and sign up for?
11 Bravo Infantry.
That's right. That's what you're saying.
Yep.
And how long where'd you go through basic?
Fort Benning. Yep. It was an interesting time. It was definitely interesting to say the least.
What'd you think of basic?
You know,
was it a shock initially?
It was a big, huge shock. You know, like I said, I was always a troublemaker, kind of just doing whatever I wanted to do and didn't really care what anybody else said. And you go from that to being like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do it right now. You're going to do it how I tell you to do it. And that was a huge shock. It was a lot to take in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. In the last interview we did, the last podcast we did with Rob Alexander, I was talking about like that first night in boot camp and in Parris Island and getting to Parris Island in that first night, just thinking like, what the fuck did I do?
Those are
my thoughts. And then we were both like, and how the hell do I get out of here?
Yeah. My thought was exactly the same. I was like, what did I do? And am I going to make it through this?
Yeah, I definitely had some doubts of whether or not I could do it. Just, you know, especially that first week, it was just, like you said, it's just a major adjustment.
It is.
And so 8 weeks, right? Boot camp?
You know, I honestly can't remember because it's called OSA. It's one-stop unit training. So you do your regular basic stuff, then you go to advanced infantry course. You learn to, you know, use Mark 18s and you kind of get into more small unit tactics stuff and learn a lot about battle drills. And, you know, honestly, I can't remember the time frame. It was so long ago, but I remember that it felt like 30 years. It did. It felt like about 30 years, yeah.
Did you guys do a lot of time out in the field during your training?
We did. Most of our time was out in the field.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. You know, I remember we were kind of next to the National Guard basic guys, and they did things a little differently than us. So with us being active, I think that the drill sergeants at the time wanted to show them that we're different than them. So every morning we'd go do PT. By the race, we'd start out by the track where you'd run. And I remember every morning we had to take sand and fill our pants with it.
Oh, jeez.
And then we'd do our 2-hour PT in the morning, every morning, just like that.
It's just dumb shit.
Yeah.
Just to make you suffer.
They're trying to get you comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes, and they do a good job of that.
They do.
So then after your initial training, where did you go after that?
Ended up at Fort Hood pretty much the whole time. And it was a lot of training out there too. I mean, 2 weeks out of every month we were in the field.
Where's Fort Hood?
Texas.
Texas.
I think they renamed it recently. I'm not really sure what they renamed it to, but We used to be called Fort Hood.
And what was and you were just out in the field a lot there?
A lot. Yeah,
you and I talked on the phone last night. You mentioned something about training. Were you doing training there as well?
Yeah, so we did a lot of stuff in a mock village. And we'd train up all these guys on how to, work their way through work their way through buildings and kind of clear buildings. And that's about the majority of what I did out there. Was a lot of that.
What kind of units were you putting through there?
There's a lot of Air Force JTAC guys. There was, and then just like basic courses for regular Army that wasn't infantry. Just kind of cover that for them for their courses or whatever. But that was it. I mean, that was a lot of what we did.
Did you continue? At what point, I guess, did you continue along that rambunctious path that you had in high school, or when that time in the Army did you start to kind of settle down and kind of get a little bit more focused? And
yeah, I definitely settled down quite a bit. When I was out there, I realized I'm missing out on a lot of my daughter's life. My oldest, she's 16 now, and it was a weird time because about halfway through my time in Fort Hood, I think it was 4 of my good friends committed suicide while I was there within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it kind of made me think pretty heavily a couple nights, and I realized how fragile life is and how valuable it is. And that, I think, was a spark for me to be like, wow, I need to really get myself together and get my mental health in check and really value what I've got.
These were friends of yours. Were there any signs or anything?
That's the weirdest thing, man, because they always seem like the happiest people. And you hear that a lot, and it's so true. You would never expect it. I mean, they would go through hard things, and a lot of us were, a couple of them were going through divorces. And, I was too at the time. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about doing anything like that. And I was struggling, and I would show it. And they wouldn't. They would always be happy, always be smiling, laughing. And those are the people that I think struggle with it the most, the ones that hide it the best.
And how did you personally deal with that when that happened?
I didn't deal with it well because, you're away from family, and those friends of yours become your family. And it's almost like a chosen family. And, when you start losing them, you start feeling that guilt, like they're gone, I'm not, why am I here, and why are they gone? And start feeling that lonely feeling like, wow, my best friends aren't here anymore. What do I do? And
I mean, they become your surrogate brothers.
They do.
That's the big thing about the military. It's about the person on your left and your right.
It is.
It's for people that haven't been there. It's kind of hard to understand, I think. But
I agree.
I've heard a lot of people even say, in battle, I'm not there. I'm not in a firefight. I'm not thinking about, I'm defending my country. I'm there because my brothers are right to my right and left, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that they make it home tonight. And
absolutely.
To have that relationship and that close to somebody, and then lose 4 people that short of a time frame, that must have been pretty difficult.
It was, and that was just the start. There were more after that, but that was the big event to make me realize I've got to change something about myself.
I'm just curious, did the Army, did you guys have any sort of a stand down, or did they try to address the issue, or try to do anything to try to help people that, were dealing with the loss?
Not to what I can remember, not that I can recall. These guys weren't even really in my units. There's just people so I was real big into the car scene, the modified car stuff, and and that's how I met those guys. They were in units spread throughout Fort Hood, but we became real close. I remember there was, there's a lot of I can't remember what it's called. I think it was like ACE training, but I think that was more for different issues, not that. But I think that's a topic they really need to start covering a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
and they may have since I've been in, but I don't remember. I don't know.
I mean, the suicide rate for veterans is still pretty
22 and above every day,
way higher than the national average. So what did you do? How did you start addressing your own mental health and your own well-being to try and deal with that loss? And then, like you said, just in general, focus on being a better dad, or being being there more for your kids and stuff, your child and stuff like that.
Well, it started with me going out a lot less, and try to be more present, a lot more FaceTime calls because she was back at home here while I was in Fort Hood. And, I started reading a lot of self-help books. As and the guys, when you're in the Army, especially in the infantry, they'll look at you and be like, what are you doing? And you kind of got to just ignore that and keep, continue doing what you're doing.
Look at this nerd.
Yeah, that's what it was like. But, it helped me a lot. I think that to really make a change with that, you've got to put the effort in, just like anything else.
Anything else. Yeah, absolutely. Unless no one can be helped unless they're ready to be helped. They're ready to take the steps to be helped.
And, I'm still working on myself. There's a lot of things that I haven't figured out yet. And I don't think anybody will ever have it all figured out.
No, definitely still always working on stuff. So how much longer were you in the, well, let me ask you this. When that happened, when you lost your friends, did you feel a pull to want to be closer to your daughter at that time?
100%. Yeah. And that's kind of why I was ready to be done with it. I wanted to come home.
It was kind of a switch, like things became clearer to you, what was most important to you.
Yes, exactly. At the time, before all that was happening, all I could think about was going out Friday night, driving over to Austin from Fort Hood and partying all night. And then when any traumatic event happens, you pause and you look at the bigger picture and you kind of realize this is what's important. This other stuff really isn't important. And you have this very distinct shift on what you should value within life.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of happened during that time.
It's definitely a life-altering moment.
It is.
When you start to realize all this other stuff is noise and static.
It is.
And
that's a very good way of putting it.
Here's what's like truly important.
Yep.
Like when you get rid of all that stuff, here's what I need to focus on. So how much longer were you in the Army after that?
I want to say like about another year. And then I, got out, came home, and it was that was a whole different set of issues coming home, completely different that I had to work through.
What kind of challenges did you face once you got home, as far as transitioning and
finding purpose?
Yeah, that's
feeling lost, finding purpose.
Because the Army gives you something to do every day.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. You feel like you're doing something, and when you come home, you realize, those friends that you built over the years before you went in, they have their own families, they have their own paths.
And they haven't seen or experienced what you've seen and experienced.
That's right.
They're viewing, I always say, like, it's the challenge, even when I used to go deploy overseas and come back on my times at the State Department, and even, having spent time in the Marines, is that I view life through a very different prism than like my wife or, anyone else, anyone who hasn't been in that environment or done those things. And I think for me, the hard part was realizing that. Like I would get frustrated, let's say, with my wife about something that seems so stupid to me or mundane. I'm like, what are you getting so upset about? This is stupid. It's nothing. But to her, it is a big deal because,
and there should be a level of grace there that you give to other people. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, because what she thinks is stressful and is a big deal to me is like nothing. Cause,
yes, I know exactly what you're
I've been in areas where death is a real possibility or might happen. So, but as far as transitioning and dealing with that, what struggles and how did you start working your way through that? Was there a low and then you started to find something that helped you get out of that?
From what I can remember, I remember coming home and it was definitely, I was on a high. I was like, I'm out of the Army. I can come back home, see my people. And then there was a point where I was like, wow, these people that were a big part of my life just aren't anymore. They're all, and there's nothing wrong with that. They have their own families, they have their own responsibilities, and that's great. You almost feel like you're left behind when you come home. And I think what brought me back from that was, meeting another person at that time. And we actually had 2 children together, my youngest 2. And that's kind of when you find your purpose again, is when you actually have a purpose. And that was, not only my 16-year-old, that was now 16, but then I ended up having 2 more daughters. And, I think that's what kind of brought me out of my hole. But of that feeling of lost, you know what I mean? You just feel lost. You feel like you have no purpose. I think that's what brought me out was kids again.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been my
on
kids.
Your family, your energy, and your focus was on your family and being with them, and which is a good place to have it.
It is. Yeah.
But Do you think that other stuff you got over it, or do you think it was kind of just put away?
I think it was put on the back burner for sure.
For a while.
Yeah.
Did it come back at some point to what you experienced, unfortunately, with the suicides?
It did, and it still does. Yeah. So, and I'll explain that in this kind of way. I think that when that started happening, my friends started, committing suicide. It created that feeling of loneliness, a feeling of loss and saying goodbye. And I think that, like, when my divorce happened, it was like saying goodbye. You felt that loneliness, and those feelings come rushing back because you associate it with loneliness.
Yeah, and
that's when that shows up. Is when you start feeling that. For me, anyways, that's when that shows up.
Yeah. And so, what? How do you deal with that when that happens now? I mean, so let me back up just a little bit. So, at what point, like when we were talking, last night, on the phone, you mentioned like becoming a captain and starting your charter business and chartering with people. That was a really big step for you as far as not moving on, but I guess, dealing with all that stuff.
It was, because when I first got out of the Army, I went to law enforcement, and it was, you get that camaraderie you're looking for, but it's still the same kind of stress.
Where were you?
I was with Berkeley County.
Berkeley County. Okay.
Yeah.
How long did you do that for?
About 2.5 years, not too long. And most of my time I spent in the jail, which was wild. But
well, let's hear a little bit about that. What was that like?
Oh man, it was a lot of fist fights, a lot of cell extraction and hostage stuff. Like whenever they grab another inmate, and you've got to go in there and snatch them back up. And
so that's a whole nother like level of stress. And,
it is.
And, like dealing with that. Did you? I mean, interesting. Like, did you ever have trouble at the end of the day letting that stuff go and leaving work at work and when you would go home? Or
sometimes, not. Yeah, sometimes I guess I did. I guess I haven't really thought about that until just now. But yeah, I mean, because you get frustrated with these people.
It's hard not to take some of that stuff home with you.
It is very hard,
especially when you have a really difficult day.
Yes, that's right. I was part of their special operations response team, which is centered on cell extraction, hostage rescue, dealing with anything violent. And we saw it a lot. There's a lot of things that happened. And I think, yeah, you're right. You know what? I did bring a lot of that home. And maybe that's what led to my divorce, is bringing all that stuff home.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon. That's a very stressful job. And like, I've never dealt with inmates, but I'm assuming that, the threat is real, that something could happen to you.
Oh yeah.
When you're dealing with that. And just, I can't imagine dealing with inmates all day long is the easiest thing to do.
It's not. And the funny thing is though, is I've met a lot of people that were inmates that, I've always been respectful of these guys. I would go in there and play spades with them every night and, and give them life advice of what through my experiences. And, later on when I was out and those guys got out, I've had numerous Facebook messages like, hey man, thank you for, what you told me and the advice you gave me, it helped change my life a lot. And I think there's a lot of there's a big rewarding aspect behind that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like we talked about before. If there's someone who made a mistake and got held accountable for it and incarcerated, and they themselves realized that I want to go on a different path and reform themselves, and that's,
and it's possible
awesome.
For anybody.
That's awesome.
It is.
It's the 10% that are in there who don't give a shit.
Yes.
Those are the ones that are difficult.
And that's a real thing too.
Yeah. So you had your second divorce, like you said. Were you still working at the jail when that happened?
It was a little after that. I think that was the beginning of the downhill slope, because that's when that stress level was the highest, when I was with that person. And then, I moved on to, after that, that's when I started moving on to guiding. I got an opportunity to, my dad did it forever. And
so your dad was a guide here in Charleston?
He was, cool. For a long time. And I got an opportunity to start guiding. I made the leap of faith and took it and quit everything I was doing to do that. And, my wife at the time was very supportive of it.
That's a pretty big leap. Was that a scary leap?
It was a very scary leap, because we went from promised money to maybe you'll make some money.
Yeah.
And
benefits.
Yeah.
And health insurance.
Yes. Well, that's the cool thing is, actually when I got out of the military, I got med boarded. So I got, I still have that stuff, which I think is really the only reason I can do this successfully, while having children. But yeah, it was a big leap of faith. And, even though me and my ex are divorced, I will give her a lot of credit. She was very supportive of it. And I think that's why I got to do it. And yeah, and that's kind of was the start of the guiding career.
Did you already have a boat at that time that you were ready to just like where you could just start guiding? And number one, and then I guess number two, did you have any clients that were ready to like build up that you knew you would have some business? Or
that's a great question. I actually started out on a skiff, on a flats boat. We bought it brand new, and it was kind of just for me to scratch that itch for fishing. And that's kind of how that started. And my dad was just getting out of the charter business then, and he was like, hey, I've got these people that want to go. And that was kind of what sparked that interest, kind of started that thing going. So I started taking some of his older clients out. It was I remember my first group from him was a guy named Eric and his son Andrew. My dad took them for years, and they still fish with me to this day.
That's
His
cool.
son's about to graduate high school, and it's weird because I remember him going with my dad, and he's just a little kid. Now they go with me, and that's kind of how that started. And I got a few more from him, and then they would tell their friends, and they started going with me. That traditional organic buildup of clientele. And that's how that started, was on that skiff. It was just supposed to be just something for me to fish on, and it kicked off.
How long did you guide off with that skiff for?
I still do sometimes. It's actually for sale right now, which is a bittersweet thing. But to grow and make bigger things happen, we've got to let go of some of the stuff in the past. But yeah, I think I fished that boat for, I want to say 5 years before I moved on to another bigger boat. Yep.
So I guess I'm going to back up just a little bit to your time with the law enforcement.
Sure.
And, a lot of people we talk to, who, especially veterans who get out of the military, that you talked about that. It's kind of funny. The summer I got out of the Marines, that was the same way. I'm like, I'm out. I'm going to go have fun. I did. I mean, I went back. It was June, I think, or May when I got out. No, it was June. And I literally, I helped my buddy, one of my best friends that I grew up with. He's like a brother to me, still is. He was running this summer camp with kids, and that summer, that's all we did is every day we were ran this summer camp, and then just drank every night and partied every night. That summer was just fun. But then when the summer was over, I'm like, shit, now what am I gonna do? But you start to. That's when it kind of hits first, I'm not really connecting with people because they don't have the same experiences that I have. And two, I'm looking for that camaraderie again.
Yes.
I really started to miss that camaraderie.
The structure as well for me.
Yeah, and the structure, it definitely is. It's interesting. You hate it when you're there, but then all of a sudden when it's removed, you're like,
what do I do?
Yeah,
I need some direction.
I need some direction.
Yeah.
I need somebody to give me some left and right lateral limits here. So I guess you found that again with with law enforcement, which we talk about having that camaraderie with folks there. But when you left there, did you miss it again? I mean, or I guess for me, I guess you have a new group that you create camaraderie with, and that's people who fish.
Yes, and it's funny because I was just about to say that, because all these guides out here, although we're, it's our competition business-wise, we all work together. We all call each other, hey, this is where the bait is. The fish are eating over here. Stay away from this. They're not eating over here. We all work together, even if they're the biggest competitors that you can think of. We're always on the water for each other. If I break down, I know I can call any guide and they're going to come get me.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So, and then so that exists to this day. You have that camaraderie with fellow guides.
Yes.
and within the fishing community.
100%. Yeah.
So I guess that's, one of the things we want to get across in this podcast is that, that is ultimately where you now have found that peace or resilience, or, like you said, you're always working on it. And even to this day, the challenges and the heartache or whatever you faced from your friends that committed suicide, and the challenges of leaving the military, and that community of people that you want to connect with is in the outdoors. And that's what we're trying to get across too, is like there is something else out there once you leave the military.
There is. And like I said, when I first got out, you feel lost, you feel alone. And we're out here right now, and it's a very peaceful feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, I just met you, and I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah.
Because we're sharing a moment right now. We're outside. We're, away from all of our problems at home. It's definitely a very healing environment.
Tell me a little bit about so you moved on from a skiff, right? You're selling your skiff.
Yep.
What's your main focus now as far as taking clients out?
It's a lot of hard. I still do a lot of creek fishing. It's a lot of live bait. A lot of creek fishing, harbor fishing, for the big redfish, stuff like that. You go out to the reefs, catch cobia, grouper, snapper. I think that's what I like doing. I like giving people the opportunity to put meat on the table out there. It's so plentiful and so bountiful. You can do that, and they can really enjoy the work they put in for the day. They can, with the meat you bring back from the ocean, it's, your day's not done when you're done fishing. You get to gather people to eat and make food, make good dinner. And I think that's where I really enjoy it, is the stuff that comes afterwards as well.
Do you think it's interesting? I've asked, talking to some other guides, a lot of them, what I've heard from them is they tend to be people pleasers. Do you think that?
I think so. And
there's a reason you're guiding, right? I mean,
yeah, I think the same thing goes for me.
Yeah.
Especially when you get these people, and it's something they look forward to for however long. Some people get to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But most of these people, this is part of their vacation. They chose you to take them to do something with a very limited time they have away from their daily lives. So with that being said, you should want to please them. You should want to give them the best time possible. And, if you don't have that, I really don't think you should be guiding, to be honest with you.
That makes sense. So I guess, I don't know how it is for you, but even now, like if I'm having a tough day, or actually today was kind of a crappy day at work for one reason or another, but I find that as soon as I get out, as soon as I'm out here,
it all disappears.
It
disappears.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just, I just encourage people to get outside, people who are struggling or dealing with that stuff. And you're a perfect example of a lot of the challenges that veterans face, or anyone who's struggling with a hard time in their life, of getting into an outdoor community, getting in with a group of people that are into the same thing, like fishing, or it could be hiking or backpacking, whatever it might be, is just take that first step and try to get out there and start connecting with nature and other people.
Yeah, it's worth giving it a shot. Some people, they get so caught up in their daily lives and their problems they're having, and it's hard to see past those problems sometimes, but you've got to try to find your vice and at least give the outdoors a chance. I mean, it's true. Like you said, when you come out here, it disappears. And if you do it enough, even if it's just walking your dog outside, go out there, do that. There will be a point to where you do it enough, you're not thinking about it, and there's going to be one morning you wake up and it doesn't even pop in your head. Your problems don't pop in your head. You get over it. You learn how to heal from it. But sometimes it doesn't heal unless you put in the work.
Yeah, and I think it also, getting into it's like anything else, it gives you something to put your energy into.
It does.
If like for me, I've always been, until this year, or when we moved here last March, I've always just all I've ever fly fished for is trout.
Mm-hmm.
So like this whole new challenge for me here, while very frustrating at times,
it's a different world.
Is
for sure.
Also, but I love the challenge. Like
yeah.
That's the other thing about the outdoors, is that I think people need to be challenged and then start overcoming those challenges, and that gives you purpose.
Yeah, and there's no sense of accomplishment without challenge.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's another great thing that outdoor pursuits give you, whether it's, at this, just starting with a walk around your block, or you want to go climb Mount Everest, whatever it might be. Yeah. It gives you that.
And that's the cool thing. There's unlimited possibilities, unlimited opportunities in the outdoors. So you can go hunting, go fishing, go climb Mount Everest, go walk your dog, whatever it may be. There's so many different opportunities, so many different choices you can make when you go outside.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to, if someone wants to spend an awesome day on the water with you and
Sure.
go out and catch some fish, and they're in the Charleston area, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you to do that?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple different ways. So I actually, my Instagram is probably the best way to do it, and my phone number. I'm sure that you guys will plug in the Instagram handle or whatever it is, but it's Captain.Cody.Margate. And then
Austin will. I don't know how to do any of that
I'm
stuff.
sure he can figure it
He's
out.
the man behind the camera right there. He's the brains behind this operation.
Then my phone number is 843-425-5709, but I also subcontract through a company called All in One Charters, and they're great people.
What's the website?
It's allinonecharters, I believe.com.
Okay.
But there's a lady, Kendra, that'll answer the phone, and she's the sweetest lady ever. She'll help you out as well.
So it's like, as far as a season, like let's say, I don't know if you can break it down by year sort of quickly, but like what are you fishing for during what times of the year?
Sure. So, I'd like to say November through October, really the redfish and trout you can do year round. Flounder too, flounder more so in the summertime, but spring, summer, and some of the fall. But usually whenever late May happens through, I'd say October, you're going to have the opportunity to go out and catch cobia. There's grouper out there, red snapper, but red snapper have a very limited season, as everybody knows. There's all kinds of bottom fishing you can do. Usually June-ish, July, the tarpon start showing up really good. Jack Crevala here, we got into a big school of them the other day.
I'm going to make Austin, I'm not going to let him get away with not getting me on a tarpon, at least to try and catch on a fly rod this year.
It's a very frustrating game to play.
Yeah, I'm not holding him to letting me catch one, just giving me the opportunity.
The funny thing is, I got really lucky into the tarpon fishing thing. Not a whole lot of people know how to really do it effectively out here, and I've had some pretty good teachers out there to teach me how to do it and take those shortcuts to kind of figure them out. My cousin Brandon's a guide as well, and he's really good in it in the tarpon fishing, and he taught me a lot. There's like Colt Harrison's a really good tarpon guide, and I've fished with him quite a bit. I learned a lot of that tarpon stuff from those guys. I got to take that shortcut and go straight to it and learn from them.
I'm trying to take shortcuts. I'm too old to take the long way around. I'm getting too old, I should say. So after tarpon, what comes after? What's the season after that?
Then it kind of falls back on the redfish and the trout and stuff like that. And, the redfish can be insanely good year round. But one of my favorite things to do is December. It's when those big bull redfish start cruising up and down these beaches. Just a few miles out, and sometimes you'll see acres of them at the top. You can throw whatever you want at them, they'll eat every single cast. It's incredible.
I can't wait to see that.
It's so cool.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to add? Anything as far as like related to what we talked about, or anything else?
Yeah, you got to remember that growth doesn't happen without pain. That's a big, big thing for me. You got to go through pain to grow, and I'm still learning that lesson.
Well, Cody, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it, and thanks for the great conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.